I'm Natalie Parker, 28, standing in my small Chicago apartment staring at a pile of birthday decorations for my dad's big day. My hands shake as I untangle a string of lights, not from excitement but dread. My sister is coming, and her sharp tongue always cuts deeper than I expect. Growing up, she would roll her eyes at my quiet life, mocking my boring job while flaunting her glitzy downtown success. Last time we met, she sneered, "You'll never measure up," and I swallowed it to keep the peace. Now I'm bracing for worse. I can already picture her strutting in, ready to humiliate me in front of everyone we love. At Dad's birthday, she didn't just cross a line, she pushed me to the ground, pointed and spat. "Your place is on the floor." The room erupted in laughter. I whispered softly, "I understand," and quietly walked away. Weeks later, my phone wouldn't stop ringing. My parents, my sister, even her husband, all begging to see me. But I left only one message, just 5 words, sharp and cold. "Look down at the floor. If you were in that situation like me, would you walk away quietly or fight back on the spot?" Share your thoughts in the comments below. I'd love to hear your answer. A few weeks before Dad's birthday, I was sipping coffee in my modest Chicago apartment, scrolling through LinkedIn on my laptop. I don't often check my sister Diane's profile. Her posts are a relentless showcase of self-praise, but curiosity tugged at me that morning. Diane Parker, my older sister, had just shared an update that hit like a slap, a photo of her in a polished downtown office captioned, "Another $1 million deal closed." Not everyone can keep up, especially those stuck in dead-end office jobs. The jab was unmistakable. She meant me, the office worker she's always belittled. My stomach twisted, but I kept scrolling, hoping it was a one-off. It wasn't. Another post from last month showed Diane at a glitzy gala, with her husband Stephen Walsh grinning beside her. The caption stung deeper. "Surrounded by winners, not wannabes who think pushing papers is a career." I set my coffee down, the mug cold in my hands. Diane had no idea I wasn't just some clerk. For years, I'd been a financial investor, quietly funneling hundreds of thousands of dollars into her stockbroking firm through anonymous channels. My investments kept her company afloat during rocky markets times she'd bragged about outsmarting the crash. I never told her, or anyone, not even my dad James, who raised me to value the work over the spotlight. But Diane's words on LinkedIn, so public and cruel, brought back that old ache of being invisible in her eyes. Growing up, Diane would scoff at my quiet ways, my choice to live simply in our suburban neighborhood. "You're wasting your potential," she'd say, her voice dripping with pity. Now she was broadcasting it to her entire network. I clicked deeper into Diane's profile, my pulse quickening. A comment from a family friend, Margaret, our neighbor, popped up. "Wow, Diane, you're killing it. Your sister must be so proud." Diane's reply made my jaw clench. Natalie's too busy with her little desk job to notice. I wanted to scream. Instead, I leaned back, staring at the ceiling. I remembered a Christmas years ago when Diane laughed in front of our cousins, saying I'd never amount to much. I'd brushed it off to keep Dad happy, but it hurt. My mother, Linda, gone years now, would have hated seeing us like this. Diane's taunts weren't new, but airing them online felt like a betrayal. I'd been her silent lifeline, pouring money into her firm to save her employees, not her ego. Yet she still saw me as less. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. I could comment, reveal the truth about my investments, and watch Diane squirm. But that wasn't my style. I'd learned her need to one-up me stemmed from her own insecurities. Instead, I messaged my business partner, Richard Coleman, confirming our next investment move, another boost to Diane's firm, hidden as always. I told myself it was for her team, not her. But her posts kept gnawing at me. I scrolled through more comments, some from Dad's old friends praising Diane's success, oblivious to her cruelty. One hit hard: "Diane, your family's lucky to have you leading the way." Leading, I'd been carrying her company for years. I closed my laptop, my chest tight. Diane's posts weren't just boasts. They were a public challenge, daring me to step out of my shadow. But I didn't want to play her game. Dad's pride in my quiet choices meant more than Diane's approval ever could. Still, her taunts were growing bolder, and with his birthday looming, I sensed trouble brewing. I grabbed my phone to text Dad about the party menu, determined to focus on him. A few weeks after seeing Diane's venomous LinkedIn posts, I found myself at a sleek Chicago restaurant, its dim lighting and clinking glasses doing little to ease my nerves. Dad had insisted on a family dinner to catch up before his birthday, and I'd agreed, hoping to keep things civil. Diane sat across from me, her designer dress catching the candlelight with Stephen, her husband smirking beside her. Dad, ever the peacemaker, tried to steer the conversation toward old memories of our childhood in the suburbs. But Diane wasn't here for nostalgia. She leaned forward, her wine glass glinting, and fixed her eyes on me. "So Natalie," Diane said, her voice sharp enough to cut through the chatter, "still slaving away at that little desk job of yours." The table went quiet. I gripped my fork, my face burning, but I forced a smile. "It's fine," I said softly, not wanting to upset Dad. Diane's laugh was cold. "Fine. Oh, honey, you're such a failure compared to me. I close million-dollar deals while you're filing papers." Stephen chuckled, egging her on, and I felt the eyes of nearby diners on us. I wanted to tell her the truth, that my investments were the backbone of her precious firm, but I bit my tongue. Dad's shoulders slumped, his face tight with discomfort. Diane wasn't done. She waved her hand, dismissing my silence. "You know, some people are just meant for small lives," she said loud enough for the next table to hear. "I mean, look at me. I'm carrying this family's name forward." My chest tightened, but I kept my eyes on my plate, refusing to give her the reaction she craved. Dad tried to change the subject, mentioning his plumbing work, but Diane cut him off. "Oh, Dad, let's not bore everyone with that," she said, her tone dripping with condescension. I saw the hurt flicker in his eyes, and it took everything in me not to snap. Then came the bill, $400 for Diane's extravagant orders of wine and steak. She slid it toward Dad with a smug smile. "You got this right. I mean, I'd pay, but I'm saving for our new condo." Stephen laughed again, and I felt a surge of anger. Dad, ever proud, pulled out his wallet, his hands trembling slightly. I wanted to stop him, to tell Diane she was out of line, but I knew it would only make things worse. "I'll cover it," Dad said quietly, his voice strained. Diane leaned back, satisfied, while I swallowed my rage. She'd humiliated us both, and, for what to prove, she was better. As the waiter took the payment, Diane leaned toward me again. "You should thank me for showing you how real success looks," she whispered, her words like a blade. I met her gaze, my voice steady, despite the storm inside. "I see it clearly," I said, low enough for only her to hear. She smirked, thinking she'd won, but I was already replaying her words, her arrogance in my mind. I'd spent years propping up her company, saving her from collapse, and she dared to call me a failure. The thought of Dad's quiet sacrifice for her ego made my blood boil. I excused myself to the restroom, splashing cold water on my face to calm down. Diane's cruelty wasn't new, but this public display felt different, bolder, more vicious. I thought of Linda, our mother, who'd always preached kindness over competition. She'd be ashamed of Diane now. As I stared at my reflection, I realized this dinner wasn't just a one-off. Diane was escalating, and Dad's birthday was next. I dried my hands, my resolve hardening. I'd keep the peace for Dad's sake, but Diane was testing my limits. A few days after that humiliating dinner, I was in my Chicago apartment sorting through birthday decorations for Dad when the doorbell rang. I opened it to find Diane standing there, her arms crossed, eyes blazing. She didn't wait for an invitation, pushing past me into my living room. "We need to talk, Natalie," she snapped, her voice sharp as ever. I shut the door, my heart sinking. I'd hoped to avoid her until Dad's birthday, but Diane clearly had other plans. She spun around, her designer heels clicking on my hardwood floor, and pointed a manicured finger at me. "Do you have any idea how embarrassing you are?" Diane said, her tone venomous. Dad fawns over you like you're some saint while I'm out there making this family look good. I stood frozen, her words hitting like a wave. She was furious not because of anything I'd done, but because Dad loved me, maybe more than her. I took a deep breath, trying to stay calm. I'm not trying to compete with you, Diane, I said evenly. She laughed, a harsh sound that echoed in my small space. Compete? You're not even in my league. Your pathetic little life, your cheap apartment, your boring job. It's a disgrace to our family name. I clenched my fists, her words slicing through me. She had no clue I'd been bankrolling her company, pouring hundreds of thousands into her firm to keep it afloat. I'd kept it secret not for glory, but to protect her employees, and honestly, to avoid her gloating. But now, Diane stood in my home, tearing me down. You need to stop acting like you're something special. She continued pacing. Dad's birthday is coming, and I won't let you ruin it with your sad, simple act. Change your ways, or you're not invited. Her threat landed like a punch. Not invited to Dad's birthday. The one I'd been planning for weeks. I thought of Dad, how he'd always defended me, even when Diane belittled me. I remembered a time years ago when Linda, our mother, was still alive. She'd caught Diane mocking my modest dreams and pulled her aside, saying, "Your sister's heart is worth more than your pride." Diane hadn't listened then, and she wasn't listening now. I wanted to tell her the truth, that her success rested on my investments, but I held back. She'd only twisted into another way to claim superiority. Instead, I met her gaze. "I'm not the one embarrassing anyone," I said quietly, my voice steady despite the anger bubbling inside. Diane scoffed, tossing her hair. "Keep telling yourself that. But if you show up to Dad's party looking like a nobody, don't expect a seat at my table." She stormed toward the door, pausing to deliver one last jab. "You're lucky I even bother with you." The door slammed behind her, leaving me standing in the silence of my apartment. My hands shook as I picked up a string of birthday lights, trying to focus on Dad. Diane's words stung, but her threat cut deeper. She thought she could control me, erase me from Dad's day. I thought of Richard, my business partner, and the investments I'd made in Diane's firm. Maybe it was time to rethink that support. I sat down, staring at the decorations. Diane's visit wasn't just a tantrum, it was a line in the sand. She'd always seen me as less, but now she was trying to push me out entirely. I wouldn't let her ruin Dad's birthday, but I also wouldn't let her walk over me anymore. I grabbed my notebook to jot down party details, my resolve strengthening. A few days after Diane's confrontation, I stood in Dad's suburban Chicago home, taping streamers to the living room walls. The scent of his favorite meatloaf baking in the oven filled the air, a small comfort as we prepared for his birthday. Dad shuffled in carrying a box of old party hats, his smile warm but tired. "You're doing too much, Natalie," he said, setting the box down. I shook my head, tying a balloon to a chair. "It's your day, Dad. I want it perfect." But my chest tightened with worry. Diane's threat to exclude me from the party lingered, and I feared she'd turn this celebration into another stage for her cruelty. Dad noticed my silence and sat beside me, his calloused hands folding a paper tablecloth. "You're thinking about her, aren't you?" he asked, his voice gentle. I nodded, unable to hide my unease. "Diane's been intense lately. I'm scared she'll ruin this for you." Dad sighed, his eyes distant. "She's always been competitive, even as a kid. But you're my rock, Natalie. Don't let her dim your light." His words hit deep, stirring memories of Linda, our mother. She'd loved birthdays, always making them about family, not show. I remembered her baking Dad's cake one year, laughing as she smeared frosting on my nose. That warmth felt so far away now, with Diane's venom poisoning everything. I taped another streamer, my hands trembling. Diane's recent words, calling my life a disgrace, echoed in my mind. I hadn't told Dad about her visit, not wanting to burden him. He'd always tried to keep us close despite her jabs. "You think she'll behave tomorrow?" I asked, half hoping. Dad chuckled, but it was hollow. "I'll talk to her. She's my daughter too, but she needs to learn respect. His faith in Diane felt naive, but I didn't argue. I'd spent years propping up her company with secret investments, yet she saw me as nothing. The thought of her disrupting Dad's day made my stomach churn. We moved to the kitchen where I checked the meatloaf while Dad arranged photo frames on the table, pictures of us as kids, Linda beaming beside us. "Your mom would be proud of you," he said, holding up a photo from my 10th birthday. "She always said you had a quiet strength." I smiled, but my throat tightened. Linda's values, kindness, humility, were what I clung to even as Diane mocked them. I wondered what she'd think of Diane now, parading her arrogance, while I silently kept her firm afloat. I pushed the thought aside, focusing on the task. "Let's make this the best party yet," I said, forcing cheer into my voice. As we hung a banner, Dad hummed an old tune Linda used to sing. It steadied me, reminding me why I was here. This party wasn't just for Dad, it was for the family we used to be. But Diane's threat loomed large. Would she really try to push me out? I pictured her storming in her husband Stephen, trailing behind, ready to belittle me again. I hadn't told Richard, my business partner, about her latest stunt, but I knew he'd urge me to stand my ground. I wanted to believe I could keep the peace, but Diane was testing my limits. I straightened a crooked streamer, my resolve growing. No matter what she did, I'd protect Dad's day. I pulled out a notepad to finalize the guest list, my pen moving swiftly. The day of Dad's birthday arrived, and the family home buzzed with laughter and chatter. Streamers hung brightly, the meatloaf sat steaming on the table, and guests, neighbors, old friends mingled with drinks in hand. I moved through the crowd, refilling plates, my eyes darting toward the door. Diane hadn't shown up yet, but her threat to exclude me still echoed. Dad caught my gaze, giving me a reassuring nod as he chatted with Margaret, our neighbor. I forced a smile, hoping the night would stay peaceful. But when Diane strutted in, Stephen trailing behind her, my stomach knotted. Her sharp eyes scanned the room, locking onto me with a smirk that promised trouble. She made her way over her heels, clicking loudly, drawing attention. "Nice little party," Natalie Diane said, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "Did you spend all week on this?" I ignored her, adjusting a centerpiece, but she stepped closer, her presence suffocating. Dad tried to intervene, raising his glass for a toast, but Diane cut him off. "Oh, let's not pretend this is anything special," she said, loud enough for heads to turn. I clenched my jaw, focusing on a stack of napkins. I'd promised Dad I'd keep the peace, but Diane was already testing me. As we sat for dinner, I took a seat near Dad, hoping to stay out of her line of fire. The guests laughed over old stories, and for a moment it felt like the family Linda had loved. But then Diane stood, her chair scraping, and pointed at me. "You know, Natalie, you don't belong at this table," she said, her voice cutting through the chatter. Before I could respond, she reached over and yanked my chair back. I stumbled, crashing to the floor, my hand scraping the hardwood. The room erupted in laughter, Stephen's loudest of all, as Diane loomed over me. "Your place is on the floor," she spat, her words sharp as knives. The guests' laughter grew, some assuming it was a cruel joke, but Dad's face paled, his hands gripping the table. I looked up at Diane, her smug grin burning into me. Every moment I'd held back, her LinkedIn jabs, her restaurant taunts, her threats at my apartment flooded back. I'd poured years of silent support into her company, keeping her afloat, and this was my reward. My face burned, but I stood slowly, brushing off my dress. "I understand," I whispered, my voice steady despite the humiliation. The laughter died down, replaced by awkward murmurs. Diane raised an eyebrow, thinking she'd won, but I locked eyes with her for a moment before turning away. I grabbed my purse and walked out the door, clicking shut behind me. Outside, the cool Chicago air hit my face. I leaned against the porch railing, my hands shaking. Diane's words weren't just cruel, they were the final straw. I thought of Linda, how she'd taught me to rise above pettiness. But this wasn't pettiness anymore. It was malice. I'd spent years funneling money into Diane's firm, believing I was helping her employees, protecting Dad's pride. No more. I pulled out my phone and typed a message to Richard, my business partner, start the process to pull our investments from Diane's company. I hit send, my heart pounding. That decision wasn't just about money, it was about reclaiming my dignity. I glanced back at the house, the glow of the party spilling through the windows. Dad deserved better than Diane's spectacle. I knew she'd feel the consequences soon, but for now, I needed space. I walked to my car, my steps firm. Moments after I stepped outside, the front door of Dad's house swung open and Richard, my business partner, hurried toward me. His face was flushed, his suit slightly rumpled from a late flight into Chicago. "Natalie, I got your message," he said, catching his breath. I couldn't let this night end without setting things straight. I frowned, confused, as he gestured toward the house. "Come back inside. There's something everyone needs to hear." My heart raced. Richard wasn't one for theatrics, but his urgency pulled me back through the door, the party's chatter still lively within. The living room was warm with candlelight and laughter, though the sting of Diane's cruelty lingered in my chest. Dad stood near the cake looking worried while Diane and Stephen held court near the fireplace, her voice carrying over the crowd. Guests' friends like Margaret and Dad's old co-workers sipped drinks, unaware of the storm brewing. Richard cleared his throat, his presence commanding attention. "I apologize for interrupting." He began, his voice steady but firm. "But there's something you all need to know about Natalie Parker." Heads turned and Diane's eyes narrowed, her lips curling into a skeptical smirk. I froze, my pulse hammering. Richard had never been to one of our family gatherings before, and I hadn't expected him to show up tonight. "Natalie has been more than a friend or colleague to me," he continued, scanning the room. "She's a financial genius, a silent investor who's saved countless jobs, especially at one company in this very room." Whispers rippled through the guests. Diane's smirk faltered, and Stephen shifted uncomfortably, his glass clinking against a table. I wanted to stop Richard, to keep my secret safe, but his words pressed on, relentless. For years, Richard said Natalie has funneled hundreds of thousands of dollars into Diane's stockbroking firm anonymously through our partnership. Her investments kept it afloat during market crashes, saving employees and their families. The room fell silent, forks pausing mid-bite. Diane's face drained of color, her eyes darting to me, then back to Richard. Without Natalie's funds, Diane's million-dollar deals would have crumbled long ago. Gasps echoed, Margaret's hand flew to her mouth, and Dad's eyes widened, his expression a mix of pride and shock. Diane stammered, her voice sharp. "That's ridiculous. My firm's success is mine." Stephen placed a hand on her arm, but she shook it off, her cheeks flushing. Richard raised a hand, calm but unyielding. "I have the records, Diane. Every transfer, every rescue, Natalie's work. She never wanted credit, but I won't let her be humiliated for it." The guests stared, some whispering, others gaping at me. I stood rooted, my throat tight, as memories of Linda's lessons in humility flashed through my mind. I'd hidden my role to avoid this exact spotlight, but Richard's truth had torn that veil away. Dad stepped forward, his voice soft. "Is this true, Natalie?" I nodded, unable to meet his eyes. "I did it for the people who work there. Dad, not for her." Diane's laugh was brittle, desperate. You're nobody. This is a lie." But the guests' murmurs grew louder, their faces shifting from amusement to awe. Stephen's jaw tightened, his usual smugness gone. Richard turned to me, his voice softening. "You deserve better than being pushed to the floor, Natalie. You're the one who's been holding things together." The weight of Diane's words, her cruel taunts. Her public shaming lifted slightly, replaced by a strange mix of relief and exposure. I'd never wanted this moment, but Richard's arrival had changed everything. The guests began to approach me, their voices warm with questions and praise, while Diane stood frozen, her empire of pride cracking. Dad pulled me into a hug, his arm steady. "I always knew you were special," he whispered. I managed a small smile, but my mind was already racing toward what came next. Diane's world was about to shift, and I wasn't sure I was ready to see it fall. I stepped outside for air, needing a moment to breathe. Weeks after Dad's birthday, I sat in my Chicago apartment, the city's skyline muted through my window. The news had broken. Diane's stockbroking firm had collapsed. Without my investments pulled after her public humiliation of me, her company couldn't weather the latest market dip. Headlines buzzed about layoffs, clients fleeing, and Diane's name tied to failure. I felt a pang of guilt, not for her, but for the employees I'd tried to protect. My phone vibrated with messages, but I ignored them, sipping coffee, trying to focus on work. Then my doorbell rang, sharp and insistent. I opened the door to find Diane, Stephen, and Dad standing there. Diane's usual polish was gone. Her hair was messy, her eyes red. Stephen looked deflated, his tie loose while Dad's face carried a quiet plea. "Can we come in?" Dad asked, his voice soft. I stepped aside, my chest tight, knowing this wasn't a casual visit. They settled in my living room, the silence heavy. Diane spoke first, her voice cracking. "Natalie, we didn't know how much you did for us. I'm sorry for everything." Stephen nodded, his usual arrogance absent. "We were wrong to treat you that way." He said, his words stiff but earnest. I leaned against the counter, arms crossed, their apologies ringing hollow. I'd spent years enduring Diane's taunts, her LinkedIn posts, her restaurant mockery, her threats at my apartment, her cruel spectacle at Dad's party. Each memory stung, and their regret felt like too little, too late. Dad stepped forward, his hands clasped. "Natalie, please. Your family. Can't we find a way to move past this? For Linda's sake?" His mention of our mother, her values of unity, hit hard. I saw the pain in his eyes, the weight of a fractured family, but my own wounds were too raw. "Diane," I said, my voice steady, "you called me a failure, a disgrace. You pushed me to the floor in front of everyone." Her face crumpled, but I pressed on. "I gave everything to keep your company alive, not for you, but for the people who depended on it. And you threw it back in my face." Stephen looked away, shame etching his features. Diane's voice trembled. "I was wrong, Natalie. I was jealous, stupid. Please, give us another chance." Her words echoed Dad's plea, but they couldn't erase the years of disdain. I thought of Linda, how she'd taught me to stand tall, to value dignity over pride. Diane's collapse was her own doing, built on arrogance I'd once overlooked. I'd carried her weight for too long, sacrificing my own peace. "Look down at the floor," I said, my voice low, echoing her cruel taunt from the party. Diane flinched, her eyes wide, while Stephen froze. "That's where you wanted me," I continued. "But I'm done letting you walk over me." Dad's shoulders sagged, his hope fading, but I couldn't bend, not this time. Diane's tears fell, but I felt no urge to comfort her. "I'm not reinvesting," I said firmly. "You'll have to face the consequences of your choices." Stephen opened his mouth, then closed it, defeated. Dad reached for my hand, his voice breaking. "Natalie, I just want us to be a family again." I squeezed his hand, my heart aching. "I love you, Dad, but family doesn't mean letting someone tear you down." He nodded, tears in his eyes, understanding but grieving. As they left, Diane's steps were slow, Stephen trailing behind her. Dad lingered at the door, his face etched with sorrow. "I'm proud of you," he whispered, then followed them out. I shut the door, the silence settling around me. I thought of Linda again, her lessons about strength and self-respect. Diane's fall wasn't my victory. It was a reminder that pride could destroy even the strongest foundations. I'd chosen my dignity, and that was enough. I sat at my desk, opening my laptop to start a new project.
"I made this special recipe just for you, dear," Dolores said with that saccharine smile I had come to dread. The pasta dish she placed in front of me looked nothing like the beautiful baked ziti Eric was already enjoying. Mine had an odd grayish tint, and a smell that made my stomach turn. "My name is Lauren Macaulay, and I am 39 years old. For the past 6 years of marriage to Eric, I had endured his mother's constant undermining. What I wanted was simple: to be accepted as part of the family. What stood in my way was Dolores Harrison, a woman who had made it clear from day one that no one would ever be good enough for her precious son. The injustice I faced was her relentless campaign to drive me away, disguised as maternal concern. As I stared down at the suspicious-looking pasta, I felt something cold settle in my stomach. The smell was wrong, metallic, bitter, nothing like the herbs Dolores claimed to use. Eric hadn't even looked up from his plate, completely absorbed in his normal-looking dinner. The fact that only I had received this special version made alarm bells ring in my head. "What kind of herbs did you use?" I asked, keeping my voice light while discreetly reaching for my phone in my purse. "Oh, just old family secrets," Dolores replied, her eyes glittering with something that definitely wasn't grandmotherly affection. "I thought you might appreciate something unique." I pressed record on my phone's voice memo app, then slipped it back into my purse, positioning the opening toward Dolores. Something about this entire situation felt orchestrated, deliberate. The way she watched me, waiting for me to take a bite. The way Eric seemed completely oblivious to the tension crackling in the air. "So you made this specifically for me?" I pressed, taking a small piece on my fork but not bringing it to my mouth. "Of course, Lauren. After all these years, I finally decided to share something special with you. Something just between us girls." Her smile stretched wider, and I noticed her hands were trembling slightly. Not with age, with anticipation. That was when I knew for certain that whatever was in this pasta was not meant to nourish me. The metallic smell grew stronger as I moved the fork closer to my face, and I saw tiny green specks that definitely were not basil or oregano. They looked more like the moss that grew in damp, forgotten corners, or worse. I set down my fork and smiled back at her. "How thoughtful. Tell me more about this family recipe. I would love to know exactly what makes it so special." The tension in Dolores's dining room had been building for years. I remembered the first time Eric brought me home to meet his parents in Richmond, Virginia. Dolores had taken one look at me, a small-town teacher from North Carolina, and her face had shuddered like storm clouds rolling in. "So you teach elementary school," she had said, making it sound like I cleaned sewers for a living. How quaint. My background was simple but honest. I grew up in a family where hard work mattered more than pedigree. My father was a mechanic, my mother a nurse. We lived paycheck to paycheck, but we lived with integrity. Dolores, with her country club memberships and charity board positions, saw me as beneath her son. The past 6 years had been a careful dance around her disapproval. She would make cutting remarks about my clothing, my cooking, my family's modest income. "Eric is used to finer things," she would say, when I brought a homemade dessert to dinner. "Perhaps you should leave the entertaining to those with more experience." But Eric always defended her. "She doesn't mean anything by it," he would say afterward. "That's just how she talks." I began to suspect that he genuinely could not see his mother's cruelty, or perhaps he chose not to see it. The warning signs had been escalating lately. Last month, Dolores had accidentally served me a drink that made me violently ill while everyone else stayed perfectly healthy. The month before, she had offered me homemade cookies that tasted strongly of soap. Each time, she played innocent. "Oh my, perhaps the milk was turning." Or, "I must have confused the vanilla with the dish soap. Silly me." Now, as I sat staring at this suspicious pasta dish, I realized Dolores had finally crossed a line she could not uncross. The green specks scattered throughout looked like nothing from any herb garden. They had an artificial quality, almost crystalline. When I leaned closer, pretending to inhale the aroma, the metallic smell was overwhelming. "This looks so different from Eric's dish," I observed, gesturing toward my husband's normal-looking baked ziti. "What makes mine special?" "Oh, Eric has such a sensitive stomach," Dolores said quickly. "I thought you might enjoy something with more robust flavors. You always seem so adventurous. The recording was still running in my purse. I needed her to be more specific, more incriminating. I picked up my fork again and pretended to examine the pasta closely. These green pieces, are they a special herb? I have never seen anything quite like them. Dolores's eyes lit up with unmistakable malice. Let's just say they will give you an experience you will never forget. That was the moment I knew with absolute certainty that Dolores was trying to poison me. The way she said those words, an experience you will never forget, combined with that predatory gleam in her eyes, sent ice through my veins. This was not an accident or a misunderstanding. This was attempted murder. I felt the world shift around me as the full reality hit. My mother-in-law, the woman who had baked Eric birthday cakes and kissed his scraped knees, was sitting across from me hoping to watch me suffer. The realization was so shocking that for a moment I could not speak. What kind of experience? I managed, still recording. Oh, you will just have to trust me, she said, leaning forward expectantly. I put so much thought into this recipe. So much research. Eric finally looked up from his plate. What are you two talking about? Nothing, sweetheart, Dolores said smoothly. Just girl talk. Lauren was asking about my cooking techniques. I stared at my husband, really looked at him. His plate was clean, normal baked ziti with regular cheese and sauce. No green specks, no metallic smell. No special recipe that his mother had spent time researching. The contrast between our meals was stark and deliberate. I need to use the restroom, I said, standing carefully. My legs felt unsteady, but I managed to walk normally to Dolores's powder room. Once inside with the door locked, I immediately called 911. 911, what is your emergency? I believe someone is trying to poison me, I whispered. I am at my mother-in-law's house, and she served me food that smells wrong and has strange substances in it. She made comments suggesting it will give me an experience I will never forget. Are you in immediate danger, ma'am? I have not eaten any of it yet, but she is expecting me to. I have a recording of her confirming she made this dish specifically for me with special ingredients. What is your location? I gave them the address and my name. The dispatcher told me officers were on their way and advised me to stay on the line. I quickly texted my friend Danielle, who worked for the Richmond Police Department. Danielle, emergency, at Eric's mother's house. Think she is trying to poison me. Police coming. Can you check if anyone is available who knows me? Then I flushed the toilet for effect and returned to the dining room. Dolores was practically vibrating with anticipation. Feeling better, dear? Much better, thank you. I sat back down and picked up my fork again. Before I try this wonderful creation, could you tell me exactly what those green things are? I want to savor every ingredient. Dolores's smile turned predatory. They are special herbs I found in the woods behind the house. Quite rare. Most people cannot handle them. But I thought you might be tougher than most. My blood ran cold. Wild mushrooms or plants could be deadly. Special herbs from the woods, I repeated slowly, making sure my phone caught every word. And you found these yourself? Oh, yes, Dolores said proudly. I spent weeks researching which ones would be perfect for you. I even tested them on some of the stray cats that come around the yard. My heart stopped. She had just confessed to testing potentially lethal substances on animals. The casual way she mentioned it, as if discussing the weather, made my skin crawl. This woman was not just vindictive. She was genuinely dangerous. Eric was obliviously scrolling through his phone, completely missing the horror unfolding at his own dinner table. I wondered how many other accidents Dolores had orchestrated over the years. How many people had gotten mysteriously sick after eating her cooking. The cats, I said carefully. What happened to them? Dolores waved her hand dismissively. Oh, they wandered off afterward, probably to sleep it off somewhere quiet. Sleep it off. Or die slowly and painfully where no one would find them. I felt nausea rising in my throat that had nothing to do with the contaminated food in front of me. Just then, I heard car doors slamming outside. Dolores frowned and moved toward the window. "Who could that be?" she muttered. "Maybe package delivery?" I suggested innocently. The doorbell rang, followed by firm knocking. "Richmond Police Department." Dolores went white. She spun around to stare at me, and I saw the exact moment she realized what had happened. The fake sweetness drained from her face, replaced by raw fury. "You called the police?" she hissed. "I certainly did," I said, standing up. "After you confessed to putting unknown substances from the woods into food specifically prepared for me, and admitted to testing them on animals first." Eric finally looked up from his phone. "What is going on?" "Your mother just tried to poison me," I said bluntly. "That is ridiculous," he started. But then he looked at our 2 plates, his normal meal versus my suspicious concoction, and his expression began to change. The knocking grew more insistent. "Ma'am, we need to speak with you." Dolores stood frozen, her hands shaking. I walked to the front door and opened it to find 2 uniformed officers and Danielle, who was off duty but had come anyway. "Lauren," Danielle said, her face grim. "Are you hurt?" "Not yet. I did not eat any of it." I gestured toward the dining room. "The evidence is still on the table, and I have a recording of her confession." Officer Martinez, a middle-aged man with kind eyes, stepped inside. "Ma'am, I am going to need you to step away from the kitchen and dining area while we secure the scene." Dolores finally found her voice. "This is outrageous. Lauren is lying. It is just herbs." "Then you would not mind if we test the food?" Officer Martinez asked. "Of course not. Test away. It is perfectly safe." But her bravado cracked when I pulled out my phone and played the recording. Her own voice filled the room. "They are special herbs I found in the woods behind the house. I spent weeks researching which ones would be perfect for you. I even tested them on some of the stray cats." Eric's face went ashen. He looked from the recording to his mother to the 2 plates of food, and I watched years of willful blindness finally shatter. "Mom," he whispered, "what did you do?" Dolores's composure completely crumbled as her own words echoed through the living room. She had not expected to be recorded, had not planned for the possibility that her victim might be smart enough to gather evidence. The mask of the loving mother-in-law slipped away entirely, revealing something vicious underneath. "She made me do it!" Dolores shrieked, pointing at me. "She stole my son! She turned him against his own family!" Officer Martinez remained calm as he took notes. "Ma'am, I need you to remain quiet while we document the scene. Anything you say can be used against you." "I do not care." Dolores was spiraling now, all pretense abandoned. 6 years I have watched her poison Eric's mind against me. 6 years of watching him choose her over his own mother. I gave birth to him. I raised him. And he throws it all away for some nobody teacher. Eric looked like he had been struck. He kept staring at the 2 plates, at the obvious difference between them, as if seeing his mother clearly for the first time. "Mom, you actually tried to—" He could not finish the sentence. Danielle was carefully photographing both plates while Officer Martinez's partner, Officer Chen, spoke quietly into his radio. I heard him request a hazmat team and someone from the medical examiner's office to identify the unknown substances. "Lauren," Danielle said softly, "can you walk me through exactly what happened?" I recounted the evening step by step, from Dolores's strange insistence on this special recipe to her comments about testing the herbs on cats. With each detail, Eric grew paler. "The cats," he said suddenly. "Mom, what happened to the stray cats? There used to be 3 or 4 that came around your garden." I have not seen any of them in weeks. Dolores's face flushed red. How am I supposed to know where cats go? They are strays. But her evasion only made Eric more suspicious. You used to put food out for them. You said they reminded you of Whiskers when I was little. And now they are all gone, right around the time you started acting stranger than usual toward Lauren. I was protecting you! Dolores exploded. That woman is beneath you. She comes from nothing. Her father fixes cars. Her mother empties bedpans. You could have had anyone, any debutante, any doctor's daughter, and you chose her. The pure venom in her voice was shocking. I had known she disliked me, but this level of hatred was breathtaking. She was not just angry about losing influence over Eric. She genuinely despised everything about me and my background. Officer Martinez finished taking photos of the contaminated pasta and carefully sealed it in an evidence bag. Ma'am, you are under arrest for attempted poisoning and animal cruelty. You have the right to remain silent. No! Dolores screamed, trying to back away from him. You cannot arrest me. I am a pillar of this community. I volunteer at the hospital. I organize charity drives. Check my references. But Eric was not coming to her defense. He sat slumped in his chair, staring at his hands. When she looked to him desperately, he just shook his head. Mom, you tried to poison my wife. You killed innocent animals. I cannot. I do not even know who you are anymore. Dolores's expression shifted to something calculating and cold. Fine. If I am going down, at least I will have the satisfaction of knowing I tried to save you from a lifetime of mediocrity. As Officer Martinez cuffed her, she looked directly at me with pure hatred. You will never be good enough for him. Never. The hazmat team arrived 20 minutes later, along with a specialist from the medical examiner's office who could identify unknown botanical substances. They set up equipment in Dolores's kitchen, while Eric and I sat in the living room, watching our marriage implode in real time. I should have seen it, Eric kept saying. The cat's disappearing, you getting sick after eating here, the way she always made you different food. God, Lauren, what kind of person does that make me? I studied my husband's face, really looked at him. The shock was genuine. The horror was real. But so was 6 years of choosing to believe his mother's explanations instead of trusting his wife's concerns. I was not sure if our marriage could survive this revelation, not because of what Dolores had done, but because of what Eric had failed to see. Danielle came back from the kitchen where she had been observing the evidence collection. Lauren, they found several different plant materials in your pasta. Some appear to be pokeweed berries, which can cause severe gastrointestinal distress, convulsions, and potentially death. Others they are still identifying. Pokeweed, Eric repeated numbly. We learned about that in Boy Scouts. It is highly toxic. Officer Chen's radio crackled, and I heard dispatch mention finding 3 deceased cats buried in Dolores's back garden. My stomach turned. She had not just tested the poison, she had perfected it. How long has this been going on? I asked Eric. The weird food, the strange comments, the way she always seemed to have accidents around me. Eric rubbed his face with both hands. Looking back, maybe 2 years, maybe longer. I kept telling myself she was just getting older, more forgetful. I wanted to believe she was trying to be nice to you. She was trying to kill me, Eric. Slowly, gradually, making it look like accidents or illness. If I had eaten that pasta tonight, we sat in silence as the full implications sank in. This was not a moment of rage or passion. This was premeditated attempted murder, planned and executed over months or even years. The specialist emerged from the kitchen carrying several sealed containers. Detective Walsh? She called to Danielle. You need to see this. Dear. We followed her into the kitchen, where she had laid out samples of various plants on sterile sheets. This is definitely pokeweed, as I mentioned, but there is also foxglove, which affects the heart, and what appears to be destroying angel mushrooms, which cause liver failure. This was not someone randomly picking plants. This was someone who researched exactly how to cause maximum damage. Eric made a choking sound. She researched it. She planned this. There is more, the specialist continued. I found a notebook in the pantry with detailed notes about dosages, effects, and timing. Your mother-in-law has been documenting her experiments. They brought out a composition notebook filled with Dolores's careful handwriting. Page after page of observations about which plants caused which symptoms, how much was needed to cause illness versus death, and most chilling of all, specific notes about me. Lauren ate approximately 1/3 of the cookies before stopping. Danielle read aloud. Next time use less foxglove and more pokeweed. The bitter taste is making her suspicious. Eric doubled over like someone had punched him in the stomach. His mother had been trying to murder me for months, documenting her attempts like a scientist conducting research. I am so sorry, he whispered. Lauren, I am so sorry. I should have protected you. I should have seen what she was doing. But sorry would not undo years of choosing his mother's word over mine. Sorry would not bring back the cats. And sorry would not erase the fact that I had been living with a woman who wanted me dead. The trial was a media sensation. Debutante mother tries to poison daughter-in-law made headlines across Virginia and beyond. The prosecution had overwhelming evidence. The contaminated food, the notebook full of poisoning research, the deceased cats, and my recording of her confession. Dolores's defense attorney tried to argue temporary insanity brought on by empty nest syndrome and medication interactions. But the detailed notebook spanning 18 months destroyed any claim of spontaneous mental break. This was calculated, methodical attempted murder. I testified for 3 hours, walking the jury through every suspicious meal, every unexplained illness, every time Dolores had offered me something special, while everyone else ate normal food. Eric testified too, his voice breaking as he described finding his mother's research notes. She wrote about my wife like she was a laboratory animal, he said on the stand. She documented dosages and reactions. She was trying to find the perfect amount to kill Lauren without it looking suspicious. The most damning evidence came from the veterinarian who examined the deceased cats. All 3 had died from the same combination of toxins found in my pasta. Dolores had been perfecting her poison recipe on innocent animals before using it on me. When the verdict came back, guilty on all counts, including attempted first-degree murder and 3 counts of animal cruelty, Dolores showed no remorse. As the bailiff led her away, she turned to glare at me one final time. You destroyed my family, she hissed. No, I replied calmly. You destroyed it yourself the moment you decided I deserved to die for marrying your son. The judge sentenced her to 25 years in prison. At 68 years old, it was effectively a life sentence. Justice had been served, but the damage to my marriage was irreparable. Eric and I divorced 6 months after the trial. Despite his genuine remorse and horror at what his mother had done, I could not forgive 6 years of dismissing my concerns as paranoia. Every time he had told me I was imagining things, every time he had made excuses for his mother's behavior, every time he had chosen her word over mine, it all added up to a fundamental lack of trust that I could not rebuild. I will never stop being sorry, he told me as we signed the divorce papers. And I will never stop being grateful that you survived her. I moved back to North Carolina, to a small town outside Charlotte, where nobody knew about the case. I wanted anonymity, peace, and distance from the circus my life had become. The settlement from the divorce gave me enough money to take time off from teaching and focus on healing. But healing was complicated. I had nightmares about contaminated food. I could not eat at restaurants without wondering if someone in the kitchen wished me harm. Trust, once shattered so completely, was not easily rebuilt. Slowly, though, I began to reclaim my life. I started volunteering at an animal shelter, finding comfort in caring for creatures who had been abandoned or abused. I took self-defense classes. I learned to garden, growing my own herbs and vegetables in raised beds where I could control every ingredient. Most importantly, I learned to trust my instincts again. The little voice that had told me something was wrong with that pasta, the same voice I had learned to doubt during 6 years of being told I was paranoid, I learned to listen to it again. Dolores had tried to destroy me, but instead she had freed me from a marriage built on willful blindness and a family that saw me as expendable. Looking back on that terrifying night and the journey that followed, I realized that surviving her poison had taught me the most valuable lesson of all. My life was worth fighting for, and I would never again let anyone convince me otherwise.